Hi everyone, Mindy here for Neat and Tangled, and in today's video I'm going to be walking you through the February 2019 release, and we'll also be creating a card that I had showed earlier this week. The first thing I'm going to show you is the new mail background stamp. This is a gorgeous big red rubber stamp. You can see it's got the beautiful etching in here of all of these envelopes on here. This is great for just sending thinking of you cards or Valentine's cards. Really, it can be for anything. So one thing with the red rubber stamps, because it's already foam mounted, what you're going to want to do if you're going to use a MISTI tool is what I do actually is I'm going to remove the foam insert of my MISTI tool. Since our stamp set already has that foam on there, we don't need the insert that's in the MISTI, and then we can just lay that down, close the lid, and it'll pick that stamp up nicely, and then we can stamp onto our project. And I will be showing this later on in the video as well to create one of my cards. And then once I'm done, I can just put my foam mat back in my MISTI, and I can replace that. You can put this back on top of your stamp or you can leave it off. The next thing is the Love Mail dies. So these are some super cute dies. It has a couple stitched hearts on here, a little envelope, and this is a card I had created. I did some ink blending on the background. I used the mail background for that. I also used this little envelope that I had die cut, and I just had added in that cute little dog to hold the envelope. On this one, I also had heat embossed the background, and I did a little bit of watercoloring on there. And I also used this one of the stitched hearts that comes in the mail dies. This is another one that I had created. These were actually two, so I die cut a pattern of the hearts out of the one and used it as my front panel, and then I took the actual hearts and created another card. So 2 for 1 bonus. Now for the sentiments, this is going to lead into our next stamp set that I'm going to show you. And these are the typed sentiments. This stamp set has a lot of great sentiments on here. So you're really getting a bang for your buck when you buy this. There are so many sentiments on here, whether it be for Valentine's Day, thinking of you, love you, just to send a friend, a card to a friend. So there's a lot of great sentiments on here. And also what I did for those sentiments is I die cut those out using the Skinny Strips die. These are going to be a definite go-to in my crafty stash. So here we're just taking a look at it. You're getting all of these dies in your package. So the magnetic pack you won't get. That is how I store my stamps. But you can see it just gives you a really nice clean cut edge to your sentiment strips, or you can add a banner to it. There are various sizes and widths on this die, so you're really getting a lot out of it, and I used it on almost every card that I had shared during the release week. This next stamp set is Jump for Joy, and this has some super cute critters on here. You have a trampoline, you have a couple of jump roping, so you can mix and match. And there's also some coordinating sentiments that go with it. A card that I had showed earlier this week, I just did an ink blended background, so I have a couple of them jump roping and the sentiment at the bottom. And there's also a coordinating die set that you can purchase separately. And like I said, you won't get that magnetic piece that I have mine attached to. That's just how I personally store my dies, so I keep them with the stamp set that it goes with. Next we have Slow and Steady, and oh my gosh, how cute is this sloth? I love it. So you have this sloth riding a turtle and they're holding a flag, and then it also has some really great sentiments on here. I used It's Your Birthday, and I did mask that off, so I just have It's Your Birthday, and I used that with the Awesome die, and I also created a hill with the Landscape Duo stencil. This stamp set also comes with a coordinating die that you can purchase separately as well. Now this is just another card I wanted to share with you where I had used the Love Mail die set and also the typed sentiments. And I did use the Falling Circles die, which had been already in the store, but I did foil that onto my background. So just another example how to use them. And then this is a card that I created, and it has that little squirrel on there from the Jump for Joy set. So I have him kind of shooting up into the air, and the sky's the limit I used on that stamp set. So various ways to use these stamp sets. This is the card I'm going to create for you today. So it's going to go over quite a few of the products that I've previously shown and how to use them. So I'm going to start off by creating the background. I am using the Mail Background Stamp Set, the red rubber stamp set, and I have a piece of Bristol Smooth cardstock here because I'm going to be doing some ink blending. Now what I like to do is just put a little bit of removable adhesive on the back of my cardstock. That way when I'm stamping, it's not going to move around. I can place that right where I want it, line up my stamp, and then I can pick the stamp up with the door. So that's going to, my cardstock's going to stay in the same place. Then I'm just prepping this cardstock with an anti-static powder tool because I'm going to stamp the entire background, so I want to make sure my embossing powder only sticks to the ink. And I do ink this up. This is Lawn Fawn Clear ink, which is an embossing ink. You can use whatever embossing ink you have, whether it's Versamark. This is just what I have on hand here. And then I close the door, and I'm just giving this a really good firm push. With the red rubber stamps, they do stamp beautifully with that etched rubber. So once I have that stamped down, I'm going to take some white embossing powder, and it is best if you kind of cut your cardstock a little bit bigger than what you're going to have your card base be, only because since this does cover the entire panel, if you smudge it with your fingertips, then you can always trim that off. So that's why it's kind of always best to have your cardstock be a little bit bigger than what you're anticipating the final project to be. Once that entire background is covered, I'll just heat this up with my heat tool. So I'm melting all of that embossing powder, and then I'll set it off on the side to cool off a little bit. And it's kind of hard to see on camera there since it's white on white. Once that cardstock piece has cooled off, now I'm going to bring in and do some ink blending. So I am using the Distress Oxides. I have Picked Raspberry and Tattered Rose. I'm starting off with the Picked Raspberry and just going right in the center with some circular motions, going right over all of that I had heat embossed. And then I can go around the entire edge with the Tattered Rose. This is why I use the Bristol cardstock. I just really like how the Distress Oxides move on this. They just kind of glide over the cardstock. And then I'm blending into the Picked Raspberry, and I'll go back with the Picked Raspberry and kind of blend that out so I have a nice transition between the two colors. And then I'll set that off on the side and work on my Copic coloring. So for my image, I'm using this really cute little dog. This is from Puppy's Favorite Things, and I just thought he'd look cute, like he's holding a little love letter. So I did stamp my image onto Neenah's Solar White cardstock. This is 80 pound, and I used a Copic friendly ink. And then I'm starting out with my darkest color, which is E43, and I'm going around the ears. I will go just underneath the head and then under the bottom side of the arms, and then the inside of the legs is where I added all of my darkest colors and then blended out with the E42, E41, and E40. Now, the arms and the belly, I didn't need to color. I just did it kind of force a habit, so it completed my image, but I know my envelope's going to be hanging or sitting in front of the belly, so that's up to you if you wanted to color it all in. And then for the ears and the belly, I did E25, E23, and E21, and the little spot on his face there. So I thought these were a really cute combination for my little puppy dog. Once that is all colored in, I'm going to bring in the coordinating die, and I'm lining that up, and I'm going to hold that down with my Post-it tape. Now, I just recently invested in the Gemini Junior, so I held my image down, or my die down with that Post-it tape, and then I'm going to flip it over onto this magnetic plate that comes with the Gemini, and then I put my cutting plate on top, so that magnetic plate there is holding my die in place. And then I just run my sandwich through the die cutting machine. I am loving this machine, by the way. It cuts so beautifully, and it actually cuts pretty fast. So once that did die cut, I'll just remove that Post-it tape, which I love using to hold my dies down because it doesn't rip my paper at all. And I have this perfectly cut out image. Now for my extras for my card, I am taking some Passionate Pink cardstock and I'm going to die cut out that envelope from the Love Mail die set. And I also need to do a sentiment. Now since these sentiment die, the skinny strip dies, I'm sorry, are not open, so I can't see where anything is, what I'm going to do is line up, figure out which one works best for the sentiment that I want. Then I'm going to take that and I'm actually going to die cut out my banner first. And I'll show you a little trick how I'm able to line my sentiments up on such a skinny piece of cardstock. So I'll go ahead, place these on my magnetic sheet, and then I'll run these through my Gemini Junior and die cut those out. So here they are now with this envelope. It does have some scored lines on there. So I'm taking my fingernail and kind of pushing from the inside of that envelope so I can get that crease. And then I'm just going to reinforce that crease with a bone folder. So I just have some really nice crisp edges. And then to seal it off, I'm just going to put a little bit of score tape to that inside flap. And I'll finish it off with just adding a little bit of adhesive to the top. So I'm closing this envelope up. That way my puppy can hold it. So just removing that backing from the double-sided adhesive and adding some adhesive to the top there. And then we will work on the sentiment. Now I'm going to use the same trick that I did with my mail background dies. I'm adding some removable adhesive to my skinny strip here and then attaching that into the grid on my MISTI. So that way I have room to work with, I can see it, and then I can take my sentiment and line it up on that skinny strip. Once I have that lined up, even on both sides and in the middle, I can close the door of my MISTI to pick up that stamp, and you can see even though it kind of picked up my grid a little bit, it didn't move my banner. So loving removable adhesive at this point. Then since I'm heat embossing, I'm going to prep that with the anti-static powder tool, ink this up with the embossing ink, and just pushing lightly. I don't want to squish my sentiment because that would spread out the letters and you won't be able to read it as well. And then I'm just taking my tweezers and kind of prying that up a little bit. And this is also how I'm going to heat emboss, is I'm using my tweezers to do this since it is pretty skinny. So I'm just sprinkling on some of the gold embossing powder and just lightly tapping that off. And then I'm using my tweezers to hold this while I heat emboss. That way I'm keeping my fingers away. I'm not going to get it too hot. I'm not going to burn my fingers. And then we have this perfectly embossed sentiment on there. So next I'm just going to work on putting my card together. So for my card base, I have red velvet cardstock that's measured 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And I did add a piece of white cardstock that is 4 by 5 1/4. And then I'm attaching my ink blended background, and I did trim that down to 3 3/4 by 5 inches. So that'll be my main base. And then I could start just kind of getting my image together here. I have the puppy. I want it to be holding the envelope, but I did want to add a little bit of dimension to it. So I'm taking these foam squares from Gina K Designs and adding them to the back of my puppy. These foam squares are great because you could see I'm just pulling on that release paper there, and they're kind of popping up off on the side, and they're a really great width. They're not sticking up too high. They're just enough to give my image a little bit of dimension. And then once I have that covered with the foam squares, I'm just removing that release paper on the back of them. And I'm going to go ahead and add that to the center of my card. And then I decided to also add one of the foam squares to the envelope and just pop that up a little bit. If you wanted more dimension, you could add 2 layers of the foam squares. And I found that these were the perfect width to match my banner. So I just trimmed 1 1/2 there a little bit, so I had complete coverage along the entire banner. So in this project, I hope you enjoyed it today. This took a look at quite a few of the new items that are being released in the February 2019 release from Neat and Tangled. If you enjoyed today's project, please give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, and then be sure to click the little bell so you get notified of any future paper crafting videos. Thank you so much for stopping by, and I'll catch you next time.